I appreciate the chance to get to talk to you about some succession planning options.
Oh, this sounds like a good idea.
So my name is Lucy Pauley, and I'm the coordinator for the Ag and Natural Resource Mediation Program at the Department of Ag down in Cheyenne. And I know that's a lot of words that don't make sense together, but basically I help farmers and ranchers who are involved in a wide variety of issues. A lot of the stuff we do are neighbor-neighbor disputes. I'm sure you guys all love your neighbors, right, and get along fabulously. We do a lot of irrigation conflicts that pop up. And then another big area of our work is discussions like this, helping farmers and ranchers figure out the succession planning process. And what I'm going to share with you this morning is just some of the different things that pop up when we talk about succession planning, and then hopefully I'll be able to give you some resources you can take back, or I'm going to mail you some stuff to help you get started on your own process. So when we talk about succession planning, we're looking at a couple of different things. Estate planning is, the process of transferring the asset, transferring the farm or ranch, transferring the business to that next generation. Succession planning is transferring the management, transferring the decision making from one generation to the next. It can also be transferring that to somebody outside the family. Maybe there's nobody that wants to take over that entity, and so you identify who's going to take this over. Those are pretty much the two main models. A lot of times, though, folks are focusing on transferring that management from one generation to the next, or identifying who's going to take over this place when we're gone. So there's a lot of areas of stress or just big topics that we have to figure out when we embark on succession planning. And the first is the financial resources. This can be what stops people from going further into this process. Trying to get a handle on what do the finances look like? Does this place support additional people coming on board? Do we have enough, resources to expand? Things like that. And so, like I said, this is one of the first barriers that people often find. And so we have a lot of different ways we can help them start to work around them. I'm going to walk you through our workbook here in just a second, but the key thing here is we do have people available to do financial counseling, to sit down with producers and look at the books and say, what have you got going good? What do you need to work on? This is a great place to work with your lenders. A lot of you probably have accountants or are financial planners. This is a good time to bring them in and start looking at, what do we have available? We have beginning farmer rancher programs. I've got my farm credit services folks here. Sometimes they have programs that can help that next generation or that younger generation, get some financial resources they can contribute to the operation. And then getting that tax advice from professionals. Taxes can be a huge reason why we do succession planning. If for anything else, you can save your estate taxes, you can save your family taxes by doing this pre-planning. It can be really important. So those are all of the different professionals you can reach out to when you're confronting these financial issues. This is where I come in. Communication can be a huge issue in succession planning. Look back in your own families. Did Grandpa talk to Dad and aunts and uncles about the plan? Previous generations before that. This is a tough barrier to overcome. We really have to open up that communication and start talking about what do we want to do, what does the family want to do, what do we want this place to look like in the future. So we have facilitators, we have mediators. If mediator is too tough of a word, if you're like, our family loves each other, we don't need a mediator. Great, I'm glad. Consider it a facilitator. Consider it a neutral third party who just comes in and helps everybody ask those tough questions. I was working with a family one time where they just needed somebody else sitting in the room to ask some of those questions that people were afraid to ask. And once they got those questions out, everybody could move forward. I do have some other resources for helping with those tough conversations. Caveat, our office being remodeled back in Cheyenne, and I normally have boxes of material that I bring you guys to hand out, and it's all scattered. So, I've got a sheet of paper up here. You can put your mailing address, you can put your email address. Afterwards, let me know what you want me to send you. I've got some really good kind of guides on starting tough conversations, how to ask the family members questions. That's another area where our guide will help you in just a second. I'll talk about this in a second. The biggest issues we see at this point in the succession planning process are things like fairness. Things like multiple children who want to take over the management. How do we have those tough conversations? How do families decide, who gets to be the boss, who gets to come back, and things like that. And so this is where having those other people in the room to ask those tough questions can be really valuable. You have some great resources with your partners at Extension. You've got the Ag Legacy website that has a lot of good information on these kinds of things. This is one of the handouts I can send you later. I really like this. She gives a checklist on how to start a difficult conversation. And it's not just related to ag, by the way, but it's really valuable. I think the other barrier that really comes up is change. How do we go from a model of mom and dad have been in charge for 40 years and they're not necessarily going to be anymore? How do we bring this operation, how do we bring the new generation in who has new ideas? How do we incorporate it into the legacy of the farmer ranch, and how do we move forward? And I don't have easy resources here because change is hard. Change is hard for a lot of people. And so one of the things that I like to encourage people to do is look at what other families have done. Folks that you know, how have they handled some of these things? We have copies of this publication. It's the Western Farm and Ranch Transition Strategies. Extension folks from around the West went around and interviewed families who were working through succession planning. And there's some really neat examples of how they worked through some of these barriers. Like I said, we have copies of this buried. We'll get back to our office soon. But it's, sometimes reading about other people's examples can ignite some ideas of your own, can help you figure out what you want to do next. There's another great, so let's take a step back. The Ag Mediation Program in Wyoming is part of a network of ag mediation programs across the country. There's like 45 states that have programs like I do. And when you think of agriculture, do you think of New Jersey? Not necessarily, right? They actually have a really kind of thriving ag industry there. They have a great climate. They have a lot of, much smaller production, but they have a really cool publication on how they transferred farms, not ranches. I can't say New Jersey has any ranches, but how they transferred farms there and what those look like. And it's another great idea of, again, we may not have the vineyards and the turkey farms and things like that they have in New Jersey, but it just may give you ideas of what else we can do. So now I want to walk you through this workbook that we have. So as part of the mediation program, we have trained several people in this process known as Farm and Ranch Succession Coordinators. And if I had my act together, I would have one of these for each of you. I've got a few extras up here. You can come grab them afterwards. It's just a little workbook. And it's designed to help you figure out where we are now, where we want to go, and how we get there. Sounds easy enough, right? I really like the way they've set it out. Where are we now? The workbook spends about a third of the pages helping families take stock of things like, what are our assets? What are our liabilities? What is the role of each family member? What's our family tree even? I mean, real basic stuff. But we put it down on paper, we put it in these workbooks, and then we start figuring out, there's a whole page on the history of the operation. And the goal is to get the family to come together and work on these things together. Either, at meetings, or somebody takes one page, somebody else takes another page, and you start working through it. There's descriptions of the enterprise, there's a page for labor, who all is, working on the farm, are they full, are they part-time? And then there's also kind of not a survey, but actually let me just go to this page, I don't know what I'm doing here. So here's our family tree, I'm scrolling through these kind of fast. Here's the information about the profile, I'm trying to look at some pages. Some of it, so this is from Wisconsin, but we haven't changed any of it because it's valuable. There may be some things that aren't as applicable to operations out here in the West. So here's a chance for everybody would have their own page, and they, how do we talk about issues? What issues have we talked about? First question, do all family members desire for the business to continue? How have we discussed it a lot? Is this something that needs discussion? Does everybody agree on a vision for the farm business? Again, this is gauging how much have we talked about this. And this helps the farm transition coordinator figure out what are the big issues here, what do we need to talk about. Is the owner generation willing and able to mentor the successor generation? Again, have we talked about it? Is it other things that need to come up? I like this page too because it helps us identify, sorry, I'm doing this really old school, topics that need more discussion, and then the barriers to discussing this topic. Dad doesn't want to talk about it. Grandpa doesn't want to talk about it. We haven't talked about it before. These are, once we start getting some of this stuff written down, I think it really helps people see, okay, we can make some progress. We can come together. So that's the where are we now. As we scroll through, let's look at some more pages here. There's a whole section on organizing your financial information. This may be easy to do if folks have already been working with accountants and estate planners. This may be something that's just cutting and pasting it into this book. It may be new information for folks, figuring out where is all of the money, what is the real estate worth, what other assets do we have as far as insurance and things like that. What are all of the liabilities? Something as simple as putting this all down in a place where everybody can see it can be really valuable. Okay, so this is the section 1, where are you now? Again, we get into the debt. We talk about how we make decisions, okay? So everybody would have a chance to, put their names in. This is obviously available online too, if your family likes to do things that way instead. And then questions like, I know and understand the financial position and performance of the business. So for example, if I was rating that on a scale of 1 to 5, where I don't know it all, or I know everything, I can put my score in there. And then we can compare all the family member scores and say, okay, we're all on the same page, everybody agrees, they know and understand the financial position. Oh, actually we have these 3 family members that don't know anything about it. How do we want to do that? So, I don't know how much we want to walk through. If you have any questions about any of this while I'm going through here, please stop me. Again, here's another great page of just listing all of the people that, does everybody know who our insurance agent is? Are we working with lenders? Are we working with crop consultants? Having all of that contact info in one place can be really valuable. Other important documents. Some of this stuff gets lost in the conversations about ag businesses, but do we have power of attorneys for healthcare? Do we know what people want to happen if they become, incapacitated medically? Who's going to be in charge of that? Do we know where the will is? I'm dealing with this with my own family, not involved in agriculture, but just trying to figure out where some of this paperwork is. Can be really stressful. So hey, here's a place to put it down. We know exactly where it is. It was last updated in 1995. Great. At least we know where it is, right? At least we know what we have to do with it. What else do we have? Here's a bunch of stuff about insurance, where are all of our insurance policies, where are they located. You can see that there's a lot of information here on the where are we now. Okay, into where we want to be, okay? This can be a difficult part also because we may have very different ideas of where we want to be, and that's okay. We can work through it if everybody will talk about it and share their ideas. So, when we get into this section of the workbook, we have a whole page for the owner generation. I want the farm to remain in my family's possession. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. I want the farm business to continue after I retire. I want to be, I need full market value for the farm assets. This is hard for folks to talk about because sometimes they don't know. And what I will often hear is, I really want this farm or ranch available for my son when I die, when I retire. But in the same breath, I hear the son say, I'm not going to stay here if I don't get to make any decisions. And so we have, two very competing interests. And how do we bridge that gap of, I want this to be available for the next generation, but I'm going to leave if I am treated like a hired hand for the next 50 years. That can be a lot. This is where that neutral third party coming in and helping have those tough conversations can be really valuable. So lots of pages about, here, look at this one. Oops. I am okay with changes to the farm operation. A, while I'm still involved. B, only after I step away from involvement. They should have a C, like, after I die, right? Or 100 years after I die, I'm okay with you making changes to the farm operation. I think that's relatively accurate. Okay, so here we are working through where do you want to be. I think this is another, I have enough non-farm retirement savings. I don't know a lot of producers who can say that, right? I have any non-farm retirement savings. That can be, we need to talk about that. Let's figure out how do we financially support, if somebody does want to retire. I don't frankly know a lot of Wyoming producers who want to retire. Just putting it out there. I think a lot of them want to stay on that farm or ranch until the very end. And so, okay, we know that. We know that they, how are we going to take care of them? How are we going to support them medically? Where are they going to live? All of these things need to be brought up. Okay, working through the where are we now, where do we want to be? So here's intentions for the successor generation. So all that stuff before was for the owner generation. Now here's for the next generation. I am willing to make financial sacrifices and invest in our work for farm assets to reach my goal of owning the farm. How do they feel about that? What are they willing to do? Do they have spouses that are willing to make those financial sacrifices? Do they have that third generation that is? There's a lot of really good stuff in here. We don't need to go through every page. But there's a chance, as you can see, it gives the family a chance to come together and get on the same page. I have a family working through this book right now, and it's not easy. They are struggling with it. There's a lot of barriers that have popped up. The key to this process is patience. This is not going to happen overnight. This is not going to even happen, I would say, in a couple of months. This is like a year, couple of years process of working through this and getting everybody on the same page. I like, some of this may be too touchy-feely for you, so bear with me for a second. This idea of looking forward to the future. Where do you want to be 3 years from now? Where do you want to be 5 years from now? That may not seem like a big difference, but it helps us figure out, are we exactly where we want to be 5 years from now? And what can we be doing differently to get there? Okay, so we're still working through the where are we, where we want to be, and then let's move to the last place of how do we get there. Green, here we go. So, we kind of go back to that owner generation of how retired will you be, okay? So when you look at they say farm, I'm going to say farm or ranch. How are they going to spend their time? What do they want to be doing when they're, quote, retired? Are they gonna be sunbirds, or snowbirds, sunbirds? Snowbirds, are they gonna go someplace else, this time of year? Do they wanna be involved in calving season? Are they going to, I like this because it shows, how they wanna spend their time and then kind of breaking the year up into different sections. Do they have other things they wanna do off the farm or ranch? Do they have other hobbies? What do their spouses do? So a lot of this is planning. So here's another good one. How do we meet as a farm or ranch and make these decisions? Do we meet formally? Do we meet when everybody just happens to be in the barn at the same time? Or do we say, this Sunday at 2 o'clock, we're all coming together in Grandma's kitchen and we're gonna talk about these things? I tend to err on the side of treating it more like a business meeting and having a schedule, having an agenda. I know that's not comfortable for everybody, but just figure out what works for our family, what works for our operation, who all needs to be there. As we work through how do we get there? They have a lot of, here's the whole thing on setting an agenda for the meeting. Again, you may decide that that's not your style, but I think it's important to think about the more specific we can keep some of these agenda items, the more likely we are to have a successful meeting, frankly. And then, how do we identify issues that have popped up on the farm or ranch? In mediation, we try to help people really focus on the future. So as they're getting some of these issues worked out right now, that's terrific. I'm glad that's happening. I also want them to talk about what happens in 5 years when another issue pops up. What happens when somebody has a health problem. It may sound like we're being too gloomy or we're going down a road we don't need to go down. It's still important to talk about some of those what ifs. And what happens if we don't address these different issues. That's pretty much, I think, what I wanted to show you. It does get into some of the, developing operating agreements, especially when you're bringing other people on. What do those look like? Again, this is where we're going to want to bring in some of our technical expertise, our lenders, our financial planners. Who's making the day-to-day decisions? How do we make day-to-day decisions? There's just a lot of good stuff in here. There is some stuff at the back on interviewing professionals for farm succession planning. I get a lot of calls about this. How do I find a lawyer, who's working in this area? There's not an easy answer. The first answer is talk to your friends and neighbors. Who are they using? Who do they like? I encourage people to do word of mouth. That's, I think, the best way to find some of those experts. The Wyoming State Bar does have the ability now for attorneys to indicate that they're specializing in things. They didn't used to have that until a few years ago. So if you go to the State Bar's website, you can say, I need somebody who's working in ag in Fremont County, and it'll bring you up a list. It doesn't, it doesn't give a ranking or anything like that, recommendations, but at least it gives you some data to start with. But here's a tip on how to interview the folks and some different questions you might want to ask when you do that. Questions. I really want this to be a question and answer or discussion. What do you guys think about this process? Would anybody think their family would be excited? No? I get questions about how do you broach this subject? How do you say, hey, we need to sit down? And one of the pieces of advice I heard years ago was kind of capitalizing on something happening to somebody else. So, if there's somebody in your circle who is going through a rough issue like this, you guys can use it as an opportunity. We don't want that to happen to us. How do we get this conversation started? That's one way, taking something like this home and just having everybody look through it and get feedback can be another good way to do it. What else?
You do have this or you don't have that book?
I have a couple copies and then I have a ton back at the office. So as soon as the office is opened up, I can mail out a lot. For free. Our Farm Succession Coordinator services are free. We have a grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to help in that area. So all of this stuff I've talked about with this workbook, there's no charge right now, as that federal funding holds out. So it's something we want to do because this can cause a lot of stress for folks, and we are in the business of helping producers manage and reduce stress. And this is one way. We're in the business of helping them reduce conflict. We would rather we spend 2 years with you guys in this than have you go to court and sue each other over who gets the farm or ranch. That's the investment here. And we have folks that are trained and ready to go in this area. Go ahead.
I have,
I had a question. What I see a lot of times is that the older generation doesn't want to talk about this because they don't want to face the fact that, you know, they're either not going to be involved or they're not going to be around. Ultimately, you know, they're deaf, and so they won't even broach the conversation. What do you do to get started, like, in those aspects?
It's hard. It's hard because there's so many sad stories about they died and the whole thing went to heck, right? The families sued each other. There's court cases. There's examples of generations who no longer talk because somebody, you know, generations ago made a decision. I just really encourage them to think about, you know, what can we talk about now so that doesn't happen. And I know these are difficult things, but if your ultimate goal is for this farm or ranch to stay in this family, we've got to talk about these hard things right now.
We have sort of had the opposite where we ask the kids, what do you want to do, you know, and we don't want to talk about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think they're worried about
They-
hurting your feelings?
Yes, I think that's it a lot. They don't want to think about us not being here.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
Lucy, is there a resource, so my mother-in-law is very visual, so she's trapped in this YouTube world right now and stuff. And I was thought that if there was a great one of these that said, go watch this, that could open the category for the whole, don't be like Farmer Joe or
Yeah.
Rancher Tim from Kansas, so that we can start having those conversations differently. Is
That's-
there one?
There, not that I know of right now, but give me a little bit of time because I'm sure there is. It's funny because so much of our audience is not, like, don't send me a YouTube link, but it's interesting that she is. I'm sure there are. This information comes from a larger network called the International Farm Transition Network, and so I would bet that they have some good videos to share. So let me look on that. It's a great idea.
I'll just send it to her for Mother's Day.
Yeah, exactly. So with the situation with that next generation not wanting to talk about it, I think you just have to keep bringing it up and finding, you know, if you don't talk about it, what's going to happen? You know, are they really going to be happy with just surprise? Here's the will. You know, do they want to have any say? Do they want to have any input? And then sharing your experiences of how it was transferred to you, I think can be really valuable. Because I do think that families tend to get caught in the trap of, great grandpa didn't say anything, grandpa didn't say anything, dad didn't say anything, that's what we do. Well, we can change that. For tax reasons alone, right? Or just identifying other resources there.
okay.
What else?
I have family and friends both that have been through hard transitions. You know, that huge cattle ranch in, I think it was mostly Nevada, that the lawyers got it all, and it was 30 years getting settled, and I still don't think it's all settled.
Right, right.
You know, with my brother-in-law, and then another friend, he's there helping his dad all these years, and then when dad died, the older brother and sister who don't care about the ranch at all in New Mexico, they come in and say, well, yeah, as long as you can make money, we'll let you go ahead and keep going, but they're not willing to put anything into it. So he's doing still all the work,
Right.
you know, so it's an issue. I see it, like you're saying,
It is.
happening quite a bit.
It is, and I try not to scare people into it, but that's a great example. If you don't get something figured out, then the attorneys do benefit from it. Or you have to sell half of it off to pay for all of those different fees and things like that. And so, I encourage people to think about, I'd rather everybody be mad right now and get it and work through it than be mad after I'm dead and there's nothing I can do about it. Go ahead.
I've been in agriculture my whole life, and my dad, I mean, generations deep, right? And we had the conversations. It's so important. And Dad was starting on the legal part of it. I have one brother, and the rest are girls. And it was gonna go to our brother. Well, Dad started on the legal aspects of it, making there's a lot of that. You have to start though, you have to have the conversations. We were all on board, we knew what he wanted to do, and we were good with that. And he ended up having a stroke, and he was nonverbal before he got everything done with the lawyer. But we knew that he wanted it to go to our brother, who ended up dying. And so here are all of these girls, none of us live there anymore. It's in southeastern Idaho. And we still have it. We still have the farm because we feel like it went flat right in our lap because none of the ends had been, I mean, they were working toward that end, but it didn't. Anyway, so we've just been leasing it, and we're all in different states. I have one in North Carolina, one in Colorado, me in Wyoming, one in Idaho. We're just, it's all over the place, but, and we keep it, and we're just leasing it out. But the thing is, it has to start with conversation. You have to know where the direction is, even though that direction changed, because the two key players died. And anyway, but you have to start with the conversation. You have to, because then all the legal stuff comes into it, and that's a whole additional ball of wax.
So you at least understood your dad, that's what your dad wanted to do, and,
Well, to pass it over to my
To him,
brother, but
yeah.
then my brother ended up dying, and so then what?
you didn't have any heirs?
None of them that wanted to do any,
Yeah.
have anything to
Yeah.
do with it, and so we still just lease it out and split it up equally amongst us until we get to the point, because we all grew up there. We all have,
Sure.
it just runs deep into our roots, and none of us want to sell. But that's what it's gonna have to be, but none of us, we just can't. It's just, we feel like the torch was handed to us, and it's just hard.
Yeah.
So even when you do have it all
Right.
planned out, it doesn't always
Still,
work
yeah.
out the way you want
Yeah.
it to be.
Definitely, for sure.
I would,
Let me go right back here, yeah.
Where's the best place to keep the documents? You know, it's already notarized
Ooh,
paperwork.
good question.
Where, I mean, it used to be a safety deposit box at the bank, but that's kind of old school now.
What do you guys think? Where do you guys keep yours?
A lot of
safe?
times your accountant or your lawyer will have it online, like down bank that you can access and keep a lot of that stuff online for your accountant and your lawyer to have on hand, and then you can access it too. But knowing where it is a good.
I think both is really good, to have a hard copy and a fire safe in your house, and to also have the online stuff, so that everybody, all the players have access to it. I think it's awesome.
Plus the whole world.
What's that?
Plus the whole world.
Well, but I do think, I think if you do have those technical experts that you work with, making sure they have those copies, but then having it somewhere in the house, you can buy those little fire safes, they're pretty small. I think, I would imagine a lot of you have gun safes, I think that's a great place. We have a gun safe, and the lock is so complicated that I even can't get into it. And so I keep telling my husband, I'm like, you gotta teach somebody else how to open this thing, because everything is in there,
Oh, no.
It's really valuable, but I can't.
One of our very best friends is the fire chief, and he said fire safe is really good, and put it on the outside corner of one of your home, somewhere, on one of the four corners, because that's where they go, and that's where they look for those things, because they will throw them out if they're able to access the home. They'll get those and throw them out. So, and if it's a small fire safe, they can't pick up a gun safe.
Yeah.
Right.
But they can pick up a fire safe, you know.
Sure.
If it's, you know, yay big, they can huck that out.
Sure. I think it's less about where it is as long as other people know. So, you know, do other people know where you keep your stuff? Is it someplace that they're gonna be able to find if something were to happen? Did you have a comment too?
I did, because we've seen a lot of these different examples over the years from a lady perspective. And it's generally not very good when families start not agreeing on how this thing. And you hit the nail on the head, you gotta start somewhere. This is not an overnight process. It's could be a multi-year before everything gets established. The hardest thing we see is producers taking the first step. That seems to be the hardest. Once you do that, then the process can play out over. But so many times, this just happened last week, 2 brothers with a very complex operation. And, you know, you really need to do something about estate planning. And the answers will be, yeah, we really know we need to do that. We really know we need, nothing ever happens. So any way to encourage and we're gonna think about this as a company too, what can we do to help people, maybe not the planning, but how do you get them to take that first step? That's the critical
They
piece.
come in the spring and they say we need operating money, I'll tell you got a plan.
Oh, that sounds a little harsh.
Oh, that's not a bad idea, huh? Yeah.
One thing our family did is, yearly on our dad's birthday, which he'd be 102 right now if he were still alive. We would get together for his birthday to celebrate it, and then after he died, we would get together and have these conversations, have our real meeting, kind of to honor him and to try and make it go forward. But to just have, I mean, you know, you have an annual family reunion, hopefully, and maybe you have a family farm future meeting, just annually, and have a plan and just have something you can count on, not just this ambiguous, we need to do that someday, but every day, March 6th, we're getting together. Every year, March 6th, we're getting together.
I'd say more often than not, it's good intentions. Nothing happens, no follow through until something drastic happens, one of them passes or something.
Right.
Then it's almost too late.
Right.
Well, the other thing I would point out to that is, I work for Wyoming Bean Farm and Ranch Operations. Yeah, the plan is to buy out the other 2 brothers or sisters or whatever. Our agricultural land prices have increased so much. Even if somebody went out and said, hey, I own 1/3 of this, I'm gonna buy out my other 2 siblings, or I own 1/4 of this, I'm gonna buy out my other 2 siblings. The cash flow isn't there based on an agricultural product. So if you don't start taking that into consideration from the get-go, your plan is to say, we all have a plan, it's just not may be the plan that's best for everybody involved. The government has a plan for you, if you don't make a plan, it supersedes theirs.
I think the other thing is to remember that it's a moving target too. I mean, you start out when your kids are small, you decide who's gonna take them if something happens to you, and as they become of age, are they old enough to take it, and then where they are in their life. One time maybe one son's gonna take it, another time maybe a different one. And then if they're in a career, or they're not in a career, if they're in a family somewhere else, and so those things can change. And you gotta be aware of that.
Absolutely. Were you gonna have a comment too?
Yeah, I kind of follow on to some of the stuff he was saying. I mean, both my daughters are under the age of 3, and if something were to happen to me and my husband, like, yeah, we have somebody who is going to take the girls, but how do we make sure that it still stays in and have those conversations with, because they're outside the family. The people we are having take the girls are outside the family that don't farm the ranch. How do we go about making sure our operation stays available and still has the funds to be able to produce until the girls get of age to make that decision? So how do you go about those discussions? Because they're 3 and 9 months, like they don't know anything about collecting chicken eggs is about the gist of the work we get so far. And sometimes that don't even make it to the house, so.
No, that's a great question, and I think starting to identify, are there other people that would be willing to keep working it until they were ready? Or, how do you, I don't know about the legal, I'm not an attorney, I don't know, the legal formations you can put into a trust or things like that, so that's there for them, but that's a great question, yeah.
I've been around this agriculture for 50 years, and I've watched time after time some nice ranch. I've happened to what you're talking about, I got 6 kids. Only one of them wants to farm, the other wants their share. I think maybe legally can't do it, I don't know. But that's what you're supposed to be doing, if you're doing for your kids, I mean, I've raised 10 kids. Only one of them's interested in farming, so why should the rest of them get part of the farm and nobody gets to farm?
Right.
I mean, there's a place right out of town, there was one of the best ranches in the country, and grandma splits it between all the grandkids. Of course, nobody has it now, and that's foolishness. I mean, you got a ranch, who's gonna take it and set it up?
Well, and that's the key problem, isn't it? It's that issue of fairness. How, I think you have to throw fairness out the window a little bit in agriculture, because there isn't going to be a farmer ranch for everybody to enjoy if we divide it up 2 ways.
No way.
Nobody, like you said, nobody can afford to buy each other out, and that's where the tough conversations come in. That's where you have to sit down and be upfront with everybody. We've identified in our workbook that this ranch is important to our legacy. We want to make sure it stays. The only way that it can stay is if 1 or 2 of you, are carrying it on. And those are hard conversations, but they have to happen. Go ahead.
That's what I saw happen with one family with a lot of kids, is that the kids all decided the family to go to one kid, but they didn't want to know which one. They wanted the parents to figure it out. And then what they did is they set up life insurance accounts for all the other kids. They probably wouldn't pay out their share, but give them a chunk of cash that would basically take their share out.
Right.
So that one kid could run it, the other ones could have some cash.
Some cash, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, there's other things, early on, there's other things to do. Are we investing in somebody's education in something else? Are we, helping buy, are we investing in a business in town that this other person, there's all these things you can do when you have that time. But when it comes down to it, if we decide as a family we want this to be carry on into future generations, then we have to make those hard decisions about who gets to be that person. But really quick, there's a story out of South Dakota from years ago, and I always use it as a cautionary tale. You can Google it. Heibolt versus Heibolt, H-E-I-B-U-L-T. Anna Heibolt was a widow. She'd inherited the farm from her husband, and she had 4 children. One son had stayed on the farm, and the other 3 had moved out of state. She, in her will, left the farm to her son because she lived on the farm with him. He took care of her and kept the farm going. She went to visit the out-of-state kids one summer, and they're like, Mom, it's not fair that he gets the farm. So they talk her into writing a new will where she divides it 4 ways. And years pass, she passes away. They go to the safe deposit box and pull out her will, and lo and behold, it's her original will, leaving it to her son. And what she had done is she had spent $750 or something on a new will, and when she got back home to South Dakota, she burned it and put the old one back in the safe deposit box. Which, was a pretty smart decision on her part, but the family sued each other, or the non-inheriting heirs sued their brother, and it went all the way to the South Dakota Supreme Court because they tried to claim that she didn't know what she was doing, she burned the wrong will, and she knew exactly what she was doing. And the judges ruled that for that $750, she bought herself, peace and quiet. I've always wondered what she told the on-farm son, but he was quoted in the Wall Street Journal that nobody talks to each other anymore, and she thought she was doing the right thing, but she left this chaos. And so don't, have those, I've always wondered if she'd been up front and said, I get it, but here's why he's keeping it, here's why it's going to him, whatever, it would have been awkward for a little while, but hopefully they would have, worked around it. So come up here, leave me a note if you want copies of any of this, fight over the 3 copies I have right now, And I'll be happy to stick around and answer questions. There's my card too, if you want me to send you some stuff, just let me know. Thank you guys.
We'll fill out the forms to see who gets the copy.
Yeah, there you go.